Donald Trump's entire world just exploded because Mark Meadows, his own chief of staff, just flipped live on camera. The man who stood beside Trump through every rally, every scandal, every secret meeting, just exposed him under oath. Meadows talked about burning documents, fake electors, even plans to overturn the 2020 election. Think about that. Trump pardoned this guy 24 hours ago, and now he's testifying against him. Republicans are panicking, prosecutors are circling, and Trump's inner circle is falling apart fast. This isn't rumor anymore. This is betrayal at the highest level. Trump's power is collapsing, and what Meadows just revealed changes everything.
Ruling that Trump was in contempt of court for the 10th time, connected to violating the gag order, and while he threatened jail, while he has mentioned the possibility of jail time before, since he didn't believe that $1,000 would actually make a difference to Donald Trump, today we seem to see him make the most serious threat yet. I just want you to read on the judge's posturing today and whether you think it actually is a real possibility that Donald Trump gets put behind bars here.
So what the judge did today was very smart, I think. There were 3 possible contempt charges, one with respect to comments about Michael Cohen, one with respect to David.
Let's start with the simplest, hardest question. Where exactly does power end and the law begin? The last few days gave us a brutal answer. Donald Trump just issued one of the broadest pardon waves of his second term, handing out clemency to the very circle of allies tied to his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Names like Rudy Giuliani and Mark Meadows. And yes, that's the same Mark Meadows who has already testified under immunity to federal prosecutors and told them Trump's election fraud claims were baseless. Those 2 facts, the mass pardons and the insider cooperation, don't cancel each other out. Together, they form a picture of raw power colliding head-on with accountability. Because when a president uses forgiveness as a shield for his own inner circle, we're not watching unity. We're watching impunity, live streamed from Washington. Presidential pardons are constitutional. They're also diagnostic. They reveal a leader's moral DNA. And when the beneficiaries are people involved in an effort to subvert a certified election, it's not about mercy, it's about message. The message is, the rules don't apply to us. But pardons don't reach everywhere. They cover federal crimes, not state ones. And several state investigations are still running: Georgia, Michigan, Arizona. So even after this burst of clemency, exposure remains. The legal risk just migrates from DC to the states. Now let's talk about Mark Meadows. He isn't some talking head grifter chasing book sales. He was the gatekeeper to the Oval Office, the man who scheduled the calls, filtered the memos, and knew which doors were open and which weren't. In 2023, ABC News reported that Meadows had been granted immunity and told prosecutors Trump knew the fraud claims were false. That alone is a crack in the myth that everyone around Trump believed the big lie. And there's another layer: document burning.
Hillary Clinton's back in the good books, is what President Trump has said. But unfortunately for Barack Obama, he's now on the receiving end. I guess Joe Biden is off the table in terms of having to go at him. But treason is a strong word to use, a very strong word to use. Michael, if there is truth to these claims, is Obama correct in thinking that this is a distraction technique if there's not truth? But what if there is truth?
So the key word is treason. And I think that that is one of Donald Trump's verbal tells. Not fewer than 12 people has he accused over the years of treason. When he wants to deflect and he wants to go on the attack and he wants to control the narrative, it's one of the words that comes up.
Cassidy Hutchinson, Meadows' former aide, testified that she repeatedly saw him feeding papers into the fireplace after meetings about contesting the election. She said his suits smelled like a bonfire. That's not normal record management. That's consciousness of guilt. When people start burning evidence, it's because they know it matters. Then there's the fake elector scheme, maybe the most technical sounding, least understood part of this entire saga. Here's the plain English version. Trump's team organized alternate slates of electors in states Joe Biden won: Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Pennsylvania. They produced fake certificates, signed them as if they were the legitimate electors, and sent them to Congress. The goal was confusion, create a constitutional fog on January 6th so that Vice President Pence could claim the results were in dispute and delay certification. It wasn't an academic exercise. It was an operational plan to nullify votes. Legal analysts from Lawfare and Just Security have described it as a coordinated multi-state conspiracy. And Meadows, according to testimony and contemporaneous emails, was part of the coordination chain. He knew who was calling whom. He tracked which state legislatures were being pressured to reconsider their results. So, when he starts talking under oath, prosecutors suddenly have a living roadmap of the plot. Trump's defenders are spinning this as persecution, saying Meadows betrayed him to save himself. Maybe he did act out of self-interest, but motives don't erase evidence. When the man sitting 20 feet from the president says, "We all knew it was a lie," that matters more than any campaign slogan. And let's not forget the timing. Trump issued these pardons after Meadows' cooperation had already leaked. That creates a grotesque irony. The same president who preaches loyalty hands a get-out-of-jail-free card to a man whose testimony could sink him. Either Trump didn't know what Meadows had told investigators, or he thought the pardon would buy silence. If it's the latter, it didn't work. Here's what makes this week so dangerous. Every time a president uses the pardon power to protect people involved in their own misconduct, it pushes the line of accountability further away. It tells future presidents, you can break the law and then forgive everyone who helped you break it. That's how democracies decay. Not overnight, but through a steady normalization of exceptions for the powerful. And this isn't happening in a vacuum. Remember, state and federal courts have already ruled against Trump in dozens of election-related cases. He lost in the Supreme Court. He lost in Georgia. He lost in Michigan. Yet the narrative of victimhood persisted, pumped out by right-wing media ecosystems designed to keep the base angry and loyal. Now, Meadows' cooperation slices right through that disinformation fog, because when Trump's own chief of staff admits there was no evidence of massive fraud, the witch hunt line collapses. You can't call it fake news when it comes from your own inner circle. The pattern we're seeing is painfully familiar. Power creates a bubble. The bubble breeds impunity. Impunity breeds corruption, and eventually, someone inside the bubble cracks. Meadows is that crack. But let's be clear. His cooperation doesn't make him a hero. It makes him a witness to history trying, maybe too late, to get on the right side of it. You don't get moral redemption for doing the right thing after you've run out of options. Still, truth is truth, no matter how late it arrives. The question now is how the Republican Party handles it, because this isn't just about one man. For years, GOP leaders tied their political survival to Trump's mythology. They defended him through 2 impeachments, a violent insurrection, and a mountain of indictments. They told voters every investigation was a partisan attack. But when the evidence comes from their own guy, the chief of staff who coordinated their entire post-election strategy, they can't just shout fake news anymore. They can try, but it rings hollow. Privately, Republican strategists are terrified. They know Trump's hold on the base remains strong, but they also see the general election math. Every new revelation about 2020 drives suburban independents further away. They can't win national elections with grievance alone. And yet, breaking from Trump still feels impossible for them. The base worships him. The money flows through him. The primary voters treat dissent as treason, so the party stays stuck, half convinced, half hostage, waiting to see if the courts will do what they can't. This isn't just a Republican problem, though. It's an American one. Because when one major party defines loyalty to a man as loyalty to the nation, democratic guardrails start to buckle. We saw that on January 6th. We saw it when election workers received death threats for doing their jobs. And we're seeing it now when a president uses pardons to rewrite the moral record of his own administration. Let's talk about those election workers for a second. They're the unseen casualties of this culture of impunity. Ordinary people counting ballots in places like Georgia or Arizona who ended up hiding their kids because of online mobs. They didn't sign up to be heroes. They signed up to administer democracy, and they paid for it because powerful people lied. That's why accountability matters. Not because we want vengeance, but because the next generation of public servants needs to know the law still means something. If power can burn documents, fabricate electors, and then hand out pardons to erase the evidence, what's left of the rule of law? People ask, why does this drag on so long? Why can't justice move faster? Because democracy doesn't run on viral moments. It runs on paperwork, testimony, procedure, slow, boring, indispensable stuff. Every sworn deposition, every subpoena, every court ruling is a brick in the wall holding back authoritarianism. When insiders like Meadows add their bricks, the wall gets higher. We also need to talk about how the media ecosystem shapes perception. Right-wing outlets are already spinning Meadows' testimony as proof of deep state coercion. Left-leaning commentators call it vindication. But strip away the spin and you're left with verifiable facts. The chief of staff burned documents. He told prosecutors Trump's fraud claims were false. Trump pardoned him anyway. Those facts don't require interpretation. They require consequences. Some will argue this is just politics. It's not. Politics is about policy differences, taxes, climate, healthcare. This is about the mechanics of democracy itself, whether the counted votes still determine who governs. Once you start treating election results as negotiable, you're not doing politics anymore. You're doing power maintenance. Let's think about the next time America faces a close election. If Trump's approach becomes the precedent, pressure the states, invent alternate electors, pardon the loyalists, what incentive will any losing candidate have to concede? None. And the peaceful transfer of power, the norm that made the U.S. exceptional for 2 centuries, dissolves into partisan brinkmanship. That's why this isn't ancient history or cable news trivia. It's a live stress test of whether democratic institutions still function when one faction treats them as obstacles. The courts, so far, have held. Judges rejected Trump's claims, even the ones filed by his own appointees. The Supreme Court declined to take up his allies' appeals. And despite the noise, the Justice Department continued building its cases. That's the boring heroism of the rule of law. It doesn't need to win the news cycle. It just needs to keep showing up. We should give credit where it's due. Investigative journalists kept digging when most Americans were too exhausted to care. Career prosecutors endured months of threats. Even some Republicans quietly testified, putting duty over party. That's the invisible scaffolding of democracy. People who choose integrity when it costs them something. Still, the moral picture is bleak. Burning documents is not cleaning up the office. Coordinating fake electors is not exploring legal options. Handing out pardons to the participants is not healing the nation. It's corruption dressed as patriotism. And the price is paid by all of us through eroded trust, polarized communities, and the creeping belief that truth itself is negotiable. Ask yourself this: if everyone involved truly believed they were acting lawfully, would they need the bonfire, the fake paperwork, the mass pardons? Would they need to attack the witnesses? Would they fear testimony from their own chief of staff? Of course not. So yes, Meadows' cooperation matters. It punctures the mythology of total loyalty. It forces the question, what did the president know, and when did he decide the truth didn't matter? By all credible accounts, Meadows told prosecutors Trump knew he'd lost on election night and pressed ahead anyway. That's the definition of intent. What happens next? More subpoenas, more witnesses deciding whether to cooperate or risk indictment, more legal battles over the limits of pardons and executive privilege, but also more clarity, because every new sworn statement makes it harder to rewrite history later. Pardons can delay justice. They can't delete it. They can't erase video, call logs, or sworn testimony. They can't stop states from pursuing their own charges. And they definitely can't change what millions of Americans saw with their own eyes on January 6th. Some people will shrug and say, the voters re-elected him, so case closed. But democracy isn't just majoritarian math. It's rules and norms that bind everyone, including the majority. The higher the office, the heavier the obligation to obey those norms. When power treats law as a suggestion, liberty becomes a slogan instead of a system. Yet there's still room for cautious hope. The institutions bent, but they didn't break. Courts kept functioning. The press kept publishing. Whistleblowers kept talking. And that means the civic antibodies are still working. Truth moves slowly, but it moves. And right now, the record says, a sitting president lost an election, tried to overturn it, and his own chief of staff has confirmed as much under oath. That's not conjecture. That's evidence. So where do we go from here? We keep insisting that facts outlive spin. We keep protecting the people and the institutions that enforce the law, even when it's inconvenient for those in power. And we remember that patriotism isn't about defending a man. It's about defending the system that keeps any man from being above the law. Because clemency can hand out favors, but it can't rewrite history. Cooperation can save one witness, but it can't erase the truth. And the rule of law, still imperfect, still human, can bend under pressure, but it hasn't broken. Not yet. Let's make sure it doesn't.